Hey, this is Tom from MVP Chess. Welcome back to my series on Bobby Fischer's seminal work, My 60 Memorable Games. In this video, we'll be analyzing game number 20 that Fischer played versus Max Euwe in the Chess Olympiad in 1960. You're not going to want to miss Fischer's epic orange crush in the Caro-Kann. Before we get started, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and join Team MVP. Really appreciate your support. So, who was Max Euwe? Well, he was the 5th world chess champion, famously defeating Alexander Alekhine in the 1935 World Chess Championship. In 1970, he also became the president of FIDE and was very instrumental in organizing Fischer's championship match versus Spassky in 1972. So, in the game, Fischer has the white pieces, and he plays e4 best by test, of course. Euwe plays c6, the Caro-Kann, and after d4, d5, Fischer exchanges here. Now, this could lead to the exchange variation of the Caro-Kann after bishop d3. But Fischer opts for c4, the so-called Botvinnik attack. He thought at this time in 1960 that this was sharpest. If you recall, in the earlier video in this series versus Petrosian, in the famous 4 queens game, Fischer opted for the 2 knights attack. So he experimented with a lot of different systems during his career versus the Caro-Kann. Nowadays, e5 is just the way to go, the advanced variation. And depending on your playing style, you could opt for the short variation, the Shirov variation, or even the Tal variation. So if you're looking for the main line against a Caro-Kann where you can put the Caro player under maximum pressure, I would really recommend researching this line. But we have c4, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, knight f3. So when you play the Botvinnik variation of the Caro-Kann, White's willing to accept an isolated queen's pawn, or IQP, in exchange for active piece play. So here, Euwe plays bishop g4. Another way of playing is to play g6 and fianchetto the bishop. An even more solid way to play is by playing e6. But Fischer says g4 is playable. And after cd, knight takes, okay, notice White's got this isolated queen's pawn, and Black's knight has come to this nice blockading square. Fischer plays a really enterprising move in this position. Queen b3. Okay, so voluntarily allowing Euwe to capture the knight on f3 and mangle Fischer's kingside pawn structure. Pawn to e6. Fischer goes pawn grabbing with queen takes b7. We have knight takes d4. Bishop b5. The knight comes back to capture the bishop on b5. So I'm going to turn it over to you for the first time in this position. Pause your videos and have a think about what Fischer should play in this position. Okay, and I just had a lesson with a student the other night, so this is really topical, about automatic recaptures. Okay, should Fischer just automatically recapture this knight on b5, or does he have a better move at his disposal? Have a think and pause your videos. So Fischer played a really nice in-between move in this position, queen c6. Okay, Fischer can recapture this knight on b5 at his leisure. It's much more important that he displace the black king. Now, when you look at Fischer's kingside pawn structure, it's not that big of a deal, okay, because both kings are relatively unsafe. Black's because it's lost the right to castle and is on the e7 square, and White's in the long term just because the kingside pawn structure is fractured. So we have queen takes b5, knight takes c3, b takes c3, and queen d7. So Fischer says in this position that he had actually reached this in his analysis, and before the Olympiad, remember, Fischer is playing with other American grandmasters and chess players in a team format. So he actually shared this analysis, this position, with Pal Benko, who's also from the United States. And here Benko suggested the move which Fischer played in the game ultimately, of rook b1. And Fischer said he didn't really think much of this move at first, but the more he investigated it, he actually noticed a concrete problem that black has in this position. And that is, because of this king on e7, it's actually very difficult for black to untangle himself on the king side and get these pieces developed. So Euwe plays queen takes b5, and you'll notice throughout this video, I practiced before this, that Max Euwe's name is very difficult to pronounce for an American, so you may notice my pronunciation changing slightly each time I pronounce it. I apologize for that, but I didn't want to pronounce it like an American and just say Euwe. Okay, so Euwe decides to keep the tension instead and plays rook d8. Fischer plays bishop e3, and we have an exchange on b5. So we've reached an endgame here where after rook d7, king e2, I think Fischer's analysis really justified his decision to play queen b3 early on, right? Allowing black to play bishop takes f3, mangle his pawn structure, because he knew in this line that his king safety wasn't really going to be an issue, and that the king would actually be really well placed in the center of the board. After these series of exchanges, it would be able to quickly come to the e2 square, allowing this rook to get into the game along the first rank and establish a nice position in the center of the board. So now we see Euwe starting to try to unravel his position on the king side, but it takes some time. f6. Fischer plays a very instructive move in this position. Okay, one key thing that you can always try to do in your chess games is try to trade off your opponent's active pieces for your inactive ones. And really, black's only active piece in this position is his rook on d7. Okay, which piece of white's hasn't gotten to the game yet? This rook on h1, and that's precisely why Fischer plays rook d1 in this position. Really instructive move. It's a simple move, but a really good one. Exchanging off black's only active piece in the position. Now, black is just left with this uncoordinated mess on the king side. So we have king d7. Euwe is anticipating Fischer's plan of advancing these queenside pawns. He does have a 2 versus 1 queenside pawn majority. So getting his king in position, also potentially opening up this diagonal for the bishop to develop. And that's why Fischer plays rook b8 in this position. Great move. Okay. Euwe was trying to unravel, to untangle his pieces, but Fischer said, no way. You're not getting this bishop out along this diagonal. I'm going to pin it to the rook and force you to make more moves to develop your pieces. King c6, and then Fischer plays bishop takes a7. He could have grabbed this pawn earlier. For example, he could have played rook 8, rook a5 a few moves ago, but he notes that this pawn wasn't going anywhere. It was there for the taking. So you may as well be patient, complete your development, activate your pieces, and then and only then go and grab this pawn. Really instructive play. Because if you think about it, if Fischer had targeted this pawn on a7 too quickly, it may have given Euwe a chance to develop these pieces and unravel. Now he's just stuck. Bishop takes a7, pawn to g5. Good move. So his plan is to perhaps play bishop g7 and developing a bishop, which would defend the rook on h8. So Fischer has a pass pawn, an outside pass pawn on the a file. Pass pawns are meant to be pushed, so he played pawn to a4 in his position. Very good. Euwe plays bishop g7 as discussed. But after rook b7, king d5, rook b7, look how Fischer's able to tie Euwe up again. The bishop's got to come back to f8. Now, Fischer says in his notes here, he was kind of trying to still figure out at this time what's the best way to squeeze the most out of his position. So this is a good opportunity, and it's always a good idea psychologically to repeat the position when you're in a position of strength. So that's what Fischer does here. We notice we have this repetition here, rook b6, king d5. But of course, Fischer doesn't want to draw in this position. He's got the more active pieces. He's the one with two passed pawns on the queen side, especially this monster on the a file. This one's going to be really hard to stop. So of course he plays a5. No way is he going to take a draw in this position. Euwe plays f5 to activate the bishop, potentially target this weak pawn on c3. Fischer plays a great move in this position, bishop b8. Go ahead and take the pawn on c3, right? This game is all about this runaway pass pawn on the a file, and bishop b8 does a really nice job of blocking the rook's influence over the a8 promotion square. So really instructive. And the bishop's very active on this diagonal, okay? Controlling a lot of key squares in the center of the board. So we have rook c8, and Fischer just continues pushing on. Really simple play by Fischer, but highly effective. And just like Capablanca, this is why I love studying Fischer's game so much, is because there's such clarity to his play. He makes it look so easy. He is playing a former world champion right now. But it's his genius, his unbelievable skill that made a lot of these wins look so easy. Believe me, in practice, it is far from it. Rook takes c3, rook b5, king c4, rook b7, targeting the bishop, which Euwe brings to d4. And Fischer found in this position a really nice way to bring home the bacon. Okay. Euwe, with his last move, is tempting to try to blockade this pass pawn. Okay. I think he would be totally willing to just part with the bishop and just get it off the board. But Fischer found a really nice way in this position to consolidate his decisive position. First, he gives a check on c7, captures this rook, and in this position found a really nice winning move, which I will give you the opportunity to find. So, white to play in this position. Of course, it is all about this passed a pawn. What did Fischer play on move 36 that forced resignation from the former world champion? Pause your videos. So congratulations if you found Fischer's winning move. And if you did, be sure to leave a note in the comments and let us know your rating. Bishop e5. Boom. Great move. Chess.com calls it a brilliant move, and I would agree. Great way to finish a game. Of course, the point being is that white is now free to push this pass pawn. If black were to take a7, and there's no way this bishop can influence the promotion square, which is on a light square. If black gets out of the pin, white would simply play bishop takes, and after king takes a7, this pawn is a mile away. Here's the square of the pawn, way away from the black king, so it would be completely winning. So, really clinical win by Fischer. Euwe, of course, was way past his prime. Okay, he became world champion in 1935, and we're now 25 years later in the 1960 Olympiad in Germany. So he was way past his prime, but of course still a formidable player. But credit to Fischer and Pal Benko for coming up with this really neat opening novelty, which at first glance looked positionally dubious, right? Like, you're letting the kingside pawn structure get mangled. You know, what is this all about? But it was all about the queenside play for Fischer. And Euwe just couldn't manage to get his kingside untangled in time to muster a defense to these runaway passed pawns on the queenside. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget, smash that subscribe button, join Team MVP, and turn on your notifications. You're not going to want to miss my next installment on game 21. Thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it. I'll see you next time.